Hi everyone, this is on DFFOO global version of the game, and specifically I'll be covering on the Gladio Cheese method that is currently the easiest, cheesiest, and I guess most popular way to complete this fight. Otherwise, Divine Alexander Lufenia is actually a very challenging stage to beat on legitimate methods. I'll be covering a little bit about how the cheese works and the party setup before heading into the actual battle. And as always, I will be including timestamps in the video description that you can use to navigate to the section that you are interested in. So a little bit of background on the cheese method. When Divine Alexander was released in the JP version of the game, the cheese was viable for about I think a week or so upon its release, and subsequently it was actually patched out of the game. So at the current point in time in the global version of the game, the cheese is still viable, but there is no telling on how long it will remain viable, if at all. So my recommendation is to try and complete the cheese if you have the required party members, and there is some flexibility to the setup, and I'll go through that very quickly. But if you do have access to the cheese, it's recommended to try and complete the stage first, because otherwise the fight can be very challenging on legitimate methods. So just a quick background on how the cheese works. Divine Alexander has a counter type attack. I'll just scroll to it. Called Sacred Crime right here. So what happens is if your entire party, and this requires all 3 party members, have maximum bravery kept out, then Divine Alexander will automatically use this attack called Sacred Crime, regardless of whose turn it is. And Sacred Crime is essentially a party-wide attack that gravity shaves all 3 party members down to 0 brave. It is considered an attack and would therefore trigger any counter attack if you have party members that are capable of counter attacks. And this is where Gladio comes in. Gladiolus, once you use his LD, will have a buff called Blink, and Blink allows him to counter any attack, including Sacred Crime. And the unique thing about Gladios counter at this point in the game is that it batteries all 3 party members. So the way the cheese works is that once Alexander uses Sacred Crime, Gladio will counter attack, and Gladio's counter attack will battery the entire party to max brave again, and it will trigger another Sacred Crime automatically, and the second Sacred Crime will trigger Gladio's counter, and essentially you get a never-ending loop of Sacred Crime into counter, into Sacred Crime, into counter, into Sacred Crime, into counter, all the way until the end of the fight. So essentially Gladio counters down Alexander from 100% to 0. For this cheese to work, setup is very important, so I'll be covering what I think is probably the most consistent way to achieve the cheese. The biggest challenge is that you need Gladio's counter to cap out all 3 party members brave, and normally his battery from the counter is not a very strong battery, so this means that you need to reduce your party members max brave to a level that will be fully batteried by Gladio's counter. The battery from Gladio's counter is dependent on the HP damage that his counter does. So which means that essentially you want to boost the damage from the counter as much as possible, and this is achieved by a combination of brave damage up and HP damage up effects, which is really what the setup requires mainly. So covering quickly about the setup, I think this is probably the most ideal party setup that you can have. So first of all, you have Paladins Pecil and Serah with their LD weapons. You don't need their EX or 1535 CP MLB, but you do need their LD weapons equipped. Their LD weapons fully realized. What you see here is that both Paladins Pecil and Serah have their bronze weapons equipped, and the main reason for that is so that you reduce their max brave to a very low amount. Now how you equip the 1-star bronze weapon is that normally when you have their, say their EX equipped, all you have to do is just go to their weapon selection screen and deselect the EX, and you can see it reverts to a 1-star bronze by default. Subsequently though, their max CP will be reduced because you're equipping a 1-star weapon, so you do need to de-equip some passives. What I would recommend is first of all to remove all max brave passives, and you need to look at any character passive that has a boost up element to it. So for example, attack boost up here for Paladin Cecil, and buff boost up as well, because these passives increases the max brave, which again you want to avoid. Same thing with the summon passives as well. Any summon that has a boost up effect here, like Alexander boost up, or Pandemonium boost guard up, or Brothers boost up, all this has the potential to increase the max brave, and you should de-equip all of them. And lastly, if you still need to remove some more CPs, some more abilities to save on CP, you can just remove any mighty or quick attack or quick skill passive, because Pecil and Serah will not use their S1 or S2 at all in the cheese, so the passives there essentially does nothing. You do want to make sure that they have any speed passives equipped, because this increases the chances that they will act before Alexander in the fight. If Alexander goes first, it ends the run and you need to keep resetting the fight. So having speed up passives help a lot in reducing the risk of that happening. So essentially, very quickly, same thing with Serah as well. You want to remove any passive that has the boost all description or boost up description. So I put that here. And as well as any max brave passive as well. And if you need to save on CP, again, just remove any quick charge or mighty skill passive, because again you won't be using their skills. For the third party member, I used Kurosami because Kurosami has a hero debuff that at maximum stacks, 5 stacks inflicts 30% HP damage up, which is very huge in this fight. However, though, for Kurosami's debuff to be at 5 stacks, you do need him to use his LD once, and you also need to swap out Kurosami for Gladio on this party setup. So, which essentially means that Kurosami needs to get 2 turns before Alexander does. So this is why the Onion Knight call ability on Serah is very important. If you don't have Onion Knight LD call, you can just use it as is. The only drawback then is that you have hero at 2 stacks instead of 5 stacks, which is significantly lower in terms of HP damage boost up, but it still works. In terms of the call ability on Paladin Cecil, I have Crawl Call equipped, mainly to enchant and imperil the Thunder element. However, I think the best enchant imperil call to have is actually Ignis. So if you have Ignis LD, it's preferable over Crawl. And the main reason for that is Ignis LD inflicts Sage Fire debuff, which not only has the Fire Imperil, but also has an additional 10% HP bonus damage up, which stacks with all the other HP bonus up effects that you have. So I don't have Ignis LD, so for that reason I use Crawl. If you don't have Crawl, really any other Enchant Imperil ability will work, even something like Vidya as well, but in which case you need to bring in the Gladio friend support before you use the call ability. So overall, I think Ignis or Crawl is the best enchanter imperiler call that you can have. For Kurosami, because you will be swapping him out, you don't need to remove any passives, so you can have Kurosami fully kitted out. In terms of summon, I set Shiva here. I think the best summons here for the fight is either Shiva or Leviathan, and the only reason for that is they have a speed affecting blessing, which increases the chances of your party acting before Alexander. It wouldn't matter too much. Essentially, you can just soft reset the fight until you get a turn order that you want. But having Shiva or Leviathan will help you get there faster, I think. Lastly, there is some flexibility here. This is what I feel is probably best, because this party setup gives you a lot of Brave and HP bonus up, and of course Paladin, Pecil and Serah also have very strong attack auras. This maximizes the damage that Gladio does with his counter. If you're missing some of these party members, another option would be Ares, because Ares LD does inflict Seal Evil, which has a 10% HP bonus up. And you can also consider Gebrand LD Call as well, which has another 10% bonus damage up. So for example, if you don't have Kurasame, you can just put Ares with a Gebrand Call, which will give you a total of 20% bonus damage up in its place. Or if you are lacking either Paladin, Pecil or Serah, you can try using Ares in their place as well. You do have a little bit less HP bonus up, but I think there is enough wiggle room for it to still work. I think that the core of it is that you try to stack as many HP and Brave damage bonus up as possible, while removing as many max Brave passives as possible from the party. Once we have such a setup equipped, the next step is to find a Gladio friend support. And currently I do have one in my list. And before you start the battle, what you want to do is take a look at the max Brave of the Gladio friend unit. The lower the max Brave, the better. Ideally, you want a max Brave that is below 15,000. So something along the lines of this 14,000 should work. Again, the biggest challenge actually is Gladio capping his own max Brave, because he does have buffs, self buffs that will increase his max Brave. So here on paper it's 14,000, but the moment he's buffed in the battle, it increases to about 30,000. However, as long as you have enough HP bonus up, it should work. And in my run that I'll be featuring shortly, you can see that he actually refunds 39,000 Brave to himself after every counter, which is far above the ceiling of max Brave that he has. So there is really quite a lot of wiggle room here. And keeping in mind that I'm also not using an Ignis LD call, which I think if it is in place, his counter can actually hit about 100,000 HP damage per hit. So that's it for the setup. I'll move on to the battle to demonstrate how the cheese works. So I'll see you guys there. Alright, so the setup at the start of the fight is quite important, and you may need to soft reset a few times. What you want is a turn order where Kurasame and Serah goes before Alexander, and Kurasame goes before Serah. Paladin Pecil's turn doesn't matter, so there is a very high chance that you get it, but if you don't, just reset the fight and it shouldn't take too many resets. So on Kurasame's turn before Serah, I have him use his LD to bump up the hero stacks to 5. And right after that, on Serah's turn, I have her call Onion Knight LD. And it's very important that when you do that, you target Paladin Pecil. Doing that, as you can see, you now have a turn order of Serah, Paladin Pecil, and Kurasame. I end the turn using Serah's LD, which triggers the HP bonus up. Now coming to Paladin Pecil's turn, I use Kral's LD call. This will inflict her debuff, as well as enchant and imperil the Thunder element. And then right after that, I end Paladin Pecil's turn using his LD. With this setup in place, you now have all the HP bonus up effects in place. And this is where I swap Kurasame out for Gladio. If you have enough stacking of Brave and HP bonus up, what happens is Gladio's counter should be able to fill up everyone's Brave. So upon using Gladio's LD, everyone's Brave is filled and it triggers Sacred Crime. Sacred Crime resets everyone's Brave to 0, and as you can see, it triggers Gladios counter, and Gladios counter refills everyone's brave to full again, which triggers Sacred Crime. The damage is very important from Gladios counter. For one thing, of course, the more damage you do, the more quickly you can end the fight, so it shouldn't take too long. But very importantly, the more damage his counter does, the more battery it does as well. The battery is tied to how much damage it does. My setup is a little bit far from optimal because I don't have Agnes LD call, so I'm actually missing the Sage Fire debuff. But you can see here that each counter he does refills him for 39,000 Brave. He currently has a max Brave of 33,000, so I am overcapping his max Brave by about 20%. So there is quite a bit of wiggle room. So if you don't have Paladin Cecile or Serah, you can try to experiment with other characters. Trying to prioritize attack auras and HP bonus up effects should do the trick for you. And very importantly, try to find a Gladio support that has as low a max Brave as possible. So that's it for this cheese. Essentially, it's just a never-ending loop of Sacred Crime into counters all the way to the end of the fight. So to keep the video a little bit shorter, I will be fast-forwarding to the end of the fight. That's it. I hope this video has been somewhat helpful, and as always, if you enjoy the content, do leave a like, comment or subscribe. It really helps a lot. Till then, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.